Jake Martinez had 3 rules for working maintenance on Harmony Point: keep your head down, fix things quietly, and never, ever get involved in alien politics. Unfortunately, the universe had a twisted sense of humor. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, elbow deep in the guts of Coffee Machine 7 in Section Delta. The ancient beast had been acting up for weeks, producing something that barely qualified as brown water. For a station housing representatives from 47 different species, decent coffee was a diplomatic necessity. The machine gurgled ominously. Jake sighed and reached for his sonic wrench, completely oblivious to the shadow that had been following Princess Zara Thul of the Corvan Empire for the past 3 corridors. Princess Zara stood 7 feet tall, with midnight blue scales that caught the station's artificial light like armor plating. Her muscular frame could have been carved from living stone, and the ceremonial war pike strapped to her back was rumored to have cleaved through a battleship's hull. She was also, at this particular moment, about to die. The assassin struck as she passed the maintenance alcove, a Helix-class neural disruptor aimed at the base of her skull. In any other circumstance, the shot would have been perfect. Unfortunately for the assassin, Jake chose that exact moment to wrestle the coffee machine's primary heating coil free from its housing. The massive metal component went flying, spinning through the air like a chrome discus. It struck the would-be killer squarely in the face with a wet crunch, sending him sprawling across the corridor in a tangle of limbs and consciousness. Jake stared at the wreckage, both mechanical and biological, scattered across the hallway. The heating coil had somehow ricocheted off the assassin and embedded itself in the opposite wall, still humming with residual energy. "Oh, come on," he groaned. "That's going to take forever to extract." Princess Zara Thul turned slowly, her reptilian eyes fixed on the human who had just saved her life without even realizing it. Her gaze traveled from his grease-stained jumpsuit to his thoroughly ordinary face, taking in every detail with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "You," she said, her voice carrying the low rumble of distant thunder, "have just proven yourself in combat." Jake blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" The princess stepped over the unconscious assassin as if he were a minor obstacle, moving closer to Jake with fluid grace. "By ancient law, you have demonstrated worthiness through your warrior's reflexes and protective instincts. Lady, I just threw a heating coil. It was an accident." Her scaled lips curved into what might have been a smile on a human face. On a Corvan warrior princess, it looked distinctly predatory. "There are no accidents in combat, small human. Only destiny. B." Jake had the sudden, horrible feeling that his day was about to get much worse. The station's main communications hub erupted into chaos exactly 14 minutes after Jake's accident. Princess Zara Thul had requisitioned the primary broadcast array, and every screen, speaker, and holographic display on Harmony Point now showed her imposing figure addressing the galaxy. "Citizens of the known worlds," she began, her voice carrying the formal cadence of royal proclamation, "I, Princess Zara Thul, first daughter of War Chief Grokhal, the heir to the Crimson Throne of the Corvan Empire, do hereby claim the human Jake Martinez as my chosen mate." Jake, who had been watching from the crowd of maintenance workers, felt his knees go weak. "Oh no, oh no, no, no. By the ancient laws of our people." Princess Zara continued, raising her war pike above her head, "He has proven himself worthy through combat, demonstrating the reflexes of a warrior and the heart of a protector. The ritual of eternal bonding shall commence when the next star cycle reaches its apex. Before the Galactic Council and witnessed by all civilized species." The transmission ended. The hub fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems and Jake's increasingly panicked breathing. Ambassador Flemwick, a crane-like aviarian whose feathers were perpetually ruffled by the stress of diplomatic protocol, came scrambling through the crowd like his tail was on fire. "This is catastrophic," he squawked, his long neck swiveling between Jake and the now blank screens. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The Corvan Empire has formal treaties with 17 major powers. Their mating rituals are considered sacred under the Celestial Accords of 2387. I threw a heating coil at someone's face. Jake protested weakly. That's not combat, that's workplace safety violations. Tell that to the princess, Captain Torres said, arriving with her usual collection of coffee cups and barely suppressed amusement. The station commander was a compact woman who had earned her position through 3 decades of keeping peace between species that ranged from militant to insane. She's requested a formal meeting with you at 1,400 hours. Can I refuse? Technically, yes, Ambassador Flemwick said, his feathers quivering. But doing so would be considered a grave insult to the Corvan royal family, which could be interpreted as an act of war against the Empire, which would result in the Galactic Council sanctioning Earth, which would... We get it, Flemwick, Captain Torres interrupted. Jake, meet with the princess. Try not to start any wars. But I don't want to get married, especially not to someone who could use me as a toothpick. The captain's grin widened. Should have thought of that before you went around saving princesses, Martinez. The meeting took place in Conference Room A, which had been hastily redecorated with Corvan ceremonial banners that looked suspiciously like they'd been repurposed from someone's personal collection. Princess Zara Thol sat at the head of the table, still in her formal armor, looking every inch the warrior royalty she was. Jake sat at the opposite end, feeling like a mouse that had accidentally wandered into a dragon's lair. You seem distressed, my chosen, the princess observed, her voice gentler than during the broadcast but still carrying enough authority to command armies. Your Highness, Jake began carefully, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Explain. I didn't save you on purpose. I was just fixing a coffee machine. The heating coil slipped out of my hands. It was completely accidental. Princess Zara Thol leaned forward, her scaled hands folded on the table. Do you believe in fate, Jake Martinez? Not particularly. My people do. We believe that the universe guides worthy souls together through trials of combat and tests of character. You may call it accident. I call it destiny choosing its champion. Jake stared at her, searching for some hint that this was an elaborate joke. He found none. So what happens now? Now, she said, rising from her chair with fluid grace, you prepare for the ritual of eternal bonding. The ceremony begins in 7 days. As she swept from the room, leaving Jake alone with his impending doom, he couldn't help but wonder if Coffee Machine 7 was still broken. It probably was. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened within hours of Princess Zara Thol's declaration, transforming the usually sedate chambers into something resembling a diplomatic hurricane. Representatives from dozens of species filled the circular amphitheater, their various forms of agitation creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, growls, and what Jake could only assume were very colorful curses and languages he didn't recognize. Councillor Vexmar, a mantis-like insectoid whose political ambitions were matched only by his disdain for mammalian species, rose from his crystalline perch with deliberate ceremony. His compound eyes glittered with what Jake was learning to recognize as poorly concealed delight. Esteemed colleagues, Vexmar began, his voice carrying the precise articulation of someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of political condescension. We gather today to address what can only be described as a diplomatic catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. Jake, seated in the witness section between Ambassador Flemwick and Captain Torres, slumped lower in his chair. He'd changed from his maintenance jumpsuit into what passed for formal wear in his wardrobe, a slightly less stained jumpsuit, but still felt hopelessly out of place among beings who commanded star fleets and shaped galactic policy. The human in question, Vexmar continued, one clawed appendage gesturing dismissively in Jake's direction, is a maintenance worker. A mere technician whose greatest accomplishment prior to this incident was presumably unclogging atmospheric recyclers. Are we truly to believe that such a being could be worthy of royal Corvan bloodline? A low rumble of agreement rippled through certain sections of the chamber. Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment and growing irritation. The Corvan Empire's mating rituals are ancient and sacred, announced Counselor Thissis of the Aquarian Collective, her gill slits fluttering with diplomatic concern. To interfere would violate the cultural preservation protocols established after the Zephyrian incident. And yet Vexmar pressed, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. To allow this farce to proceed makes a mockery of established royal bloodlines throughout the galaxy. When common laborers can stumble into marriage with imperial heirs, where does it end? The debate raged for nearly an hour, with Jake feeling more like a particularly controversial piece of legislation than a human being. Then the chamber doors burst open with a crash that silenced every voice in the room. War Chief Grok Hal of the Corvan Empire stood in the doorway, like a living mountain given consciousness and a really bad attitude. At 8.5 feet tall, he made his daughter look delicate by comparison. His scales were deeper blue, almost black, and scarred from countless battles. The warhammer strapped to his back looked like it could demolish small buildings. He surveyed the chamber with the casual authority of someone who had conquered star systems before lunch, then spoke in a voice that could have been heard in the next solar system. "Which one of you insects," he rumbled, "is questioning my daughter's choice of mate?" The silence that followed could have been measured in geological ages. Vexmar's compound eyes swiveled nervously, suddenly finding the chamber's ceiling fascinating. War Chief Grok Hal's gaze found Jake and softened imperceptibly. "So you're the one." Jake managed a weak wave. "Hi." The war chief walked down the chamber steps with surprising grace for something his size, stopping directly in front of Jake. "Small." "Yeah, I get that a lot." "My daughter says you have warrior instincts." "Your daughter says a lot of things I don't understand." Grok Hal's scarred features shifted into what might have been a smile. "Good answer. A wise warrior knows the limits of his knowledge." He turned to address the chamber, his voice carrying easily to every corner. "The law is clear. If the human proves unworthy during the bonding ritual, he dies and my daughter chooses another. If he proves worthy, then your opinions are irrelevant." Counselor Vexmar finally found his voice. "War Chief, surely you can see the diplomatic implications." "I see a room full of politicians who have forgotten that some things matter more than your endless treaties and protocols." Grok Hal's eyes glittered dangerously. "My daughter has chosen. The ritual will proceed as scheduled." As the war chief strode from the chamber, leaving diplomatic chaos in his wake, Jake realized with growing horror that his situation had just become infinitely worse. Not only was he expected to marry a warrior princess who could bench press a spacecraft, but her father, who apparently commanded the loyalty of one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces, seemed to approve of the match. "Well," Captain Torres murmured beside him, "that could have gone better." Ambassador Flemwick had gone completely white beneath his feathers. "We're all going to die." Jake couldn't argue with that assessment. Dr. Melissa Wong had exactly 72 hours to transform a maintenance technician into someone who might survive Corvan courtship rituals, and she was approaching the task with the manic intensity of a scientist whose research grant depended on keeping her subject alive. "Okay, listen carefully," she said, pacing back and forth in her xenobiology lab while Jake sat on an examination table, looking like he was waiting for a particularly unpleasant medical procedure. Corvan mating customs evolved from their warrior culture. Everything, and I mean everything, is about proving strength, courage, and worthiness. "Define everything," Jake said weakly. "Well, traditional courtship begins with the exchange of battle trophies, severed heads of enemies mostly." "She's already given me 3 of those," Jake admitted. "I've been keeping them in my quarters freezer. They're very fresh." Dr. Wong paused in her pacing. "She gave you fresh kills?" Jake, that's actually a really good sign. It means she's taking this seriously. The smell is taking over my entire living space. That's the point. The scent is supposed to permeate your environment, marking you as hers while demonstrating her prowess as a hunter. Jake buried his face in his hands. My life has become a nature documentary. The lab door chimed, and Princess Zara Thol entered carrying what appeared to be a small arsenal. She had traded her formal armor for something that might have been casual wear if you were a 7-foot-tall warrior princess, essentially the same armor, but with fewer ceremonial decorations. "My chosen," she said, offering Jake a smile that revealed teeth designed for rending flesh. "I have brought gifts to honor our approaching union." She began laying weapons on Dr. Wong's lab table with the care of someone arranging flowers. A plasma rifle that hummed with barely contained energy. A vibroblade that could presumably cut through starship hulls. Something that looked like a grenade but probably functioned more like a small nuclear device. "These belong to the Helix assassin who tried to end my life," Princess Zara explained proudly. "His defeat has brought honor to both our bloodlines." "That's very thoughtful," Jake managed, "but I should probably mention that humans don't usually—" "And this," she interrupted, producing a small vial of luminescent liquid, "is extracted from the venom glands of a Terraxian death serpent. Drinking it without dying is considered a test of worthiness among my people." Dr. Wong stepped forward quickly. "Your Highness, human physiology isn't equipped to process Terraxian neurotoxins. Even a single drop would." "Kill him instantly," Princess Zara finished, nodding approvingly. "Which is precisely the point. Only the truly worthy can survive the trial of poison." Jake stared at the vial. "That's one of the bonding ritual tests, isn't it?" "The second trial, yes. The first is combat with a mechanical war beast. The third requires you to demonstrate your intelligence and problem-solving abilities while suspended upside down from the station's main communications array." "Why upside down?" "Blood rushing to the head is supposed to enhance cognitive function. It's traditional." Dr. Wong was frantically taking notes. The physiological stress would actually impair human brain function significantly. "Princess, perhaps we could modify." "Modification would invalidate the ritual," Zara said firmly. "My chosen must prove himself according to ancient law, or our union cannot be blessed by the ancestors." She approached Jake, her expression softening slightly. "I understand your people's customs are different. Dr. Wong has been instructing me in human courtship behaviors." "She has?" "Yes. Apparently humans prefer what you call romantic gestures. I have been studying." Princess Zara reached into a pouch on her belt and produced a single red rose. Jake stared at it, touched despite himself by the gesture, until he noticed the rose was still attached to several feet of thorny stem and appeared to have been ripped directly from someone's garden, roots and all. "It is beautiful, yes?" she said hopefully. "The merchant assured me that human females treasure these above all other gifts." "It's lovely," Jake said diplomatically. "Though I should point out that human males usually give flowers to females, not the other way around." Princess Zara's brow furrowed. "Your courtship customs are confusing. The strong should provide for the weak. Since I am clearly the superior warrior, logic dictates that I should be offering tribute to you." Jake caught Dr. Wong's eye and saw his own bewilderment reflected there. Somehow, in trying to adapt to human customs, Princess Zara had managed to make the situation even more surreal. Perhaps, Dr. Wong suggested carefully, we could focus on preparing Jake for the actual ritual challenges. "An excellent suggestion," Princess Zara agreed. "My chosen, remove your clothing. We must assess your physical conditioning." "I'm sorry, what?" "The War Beast trial requires peak physical performance." I must evaluate your current capabilities to determine if you require enhancement treatments." Jake looked desperately at Dr. Wong, who shrugged helplessly. "She's not wrong. If you're going to fight a mechanical war beast, we need to know what we're working with." As Jake reluctantly began removing his jumpsuit, he couldn't help but wonder if there was some kind of cosmic law that required his dignity to be systematically demolished before his probable death. Given his recent luck, there probably was. The great amphitheater of Harmony Point had been transformed into something that belonged in a gladiatorial arena rather than a peaceful research station. Holographic projectors filled the space with images of alien spectators from across the galaxy. Counselor Vexmar Smar smug compound eyes glittering from one screen, nervous Aviarian diplomats fidgeting on another, and what appeared to be several betting pools running in real time among the Ferengi trade delegates. Jake stood in the center of it all, wearing ceremonial armor that Princess Zara had insisted was appropriately modest for a human frame. It fit like a metallic straitjacket and weighed approximately as much as a small shuttle. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished non-binary entities," announced the ritual's official observer, a pompous crystalline being whose voice resonated through harmonic frequencies, "we gather to witness the trials of eternal bonding, as prescribed by ancient Corvan law." Princess Zara sat in the place of honor, flanked by her father and what appeared to be half the Corvan military high command. She had traded her usual armor for ceremonial robes that somehow made her look even more intimidating, and her expression was a carefully controlled mask of royal composure. Only Jake could see the subtle tension in her posture, the way her clawed fingers drummed against her chair's armrest. She was nervous. That made two of them. The first trial, the observer continued, is combat with the mechanical war beast of Corvan tradition. The challenger must demonstrate courage, skill, and the warrior's heart. A section of the arena floor iris opened, and Jake's opponent rose from the depths below. The war beast stood 12 feet tall, constructed from black metal and powered by energy cells that pulsed like a heartbeat. Its design was purely functional, multiple arms ending in various weapons, treads instead of legs for mobility, and what appeared to be enough firepower to level a city block. Jake hefted his assigned weapon, a traditional Corvan war club that was roughly the size and weight of a telephone pole, and tried to remember everything Dr. Wong had taught him about Corvan combat philosophy. "Strike hard, strike fast, and try not to die," he muttered, which was essentially the sum total of his tactical knowledge. The war beast activated with a mechanical roar that shook the arena. Its weapons systems came online, targeting lasers painting Jake's chest with deadly accuracy. Then it charged. Jake did the only thing that made sense to a maintenance technician faced with a malfunctioning piece of equipment. He looked for the power coupling. Instead of meeting the beast's charge head-on, he dove aside and rolled under its massive frame, searching desperately for access panels or weak points. The war beast's weapons tracked his movement but couldn't angle downward enough to target him in the blind spot beneath its chassis. Ingenious, War Chief Grok Hal rumbled approvingly. The small human fights with cunning rather than strength. Jake found what he was looking for, a maintenance access port protected by nothing more than a simple latch. He yanked it open and began pulling cables with the methodical efficiency of someone who had spent years dealing with temperamental machinery. The war beast's movements became erratic, then stopped entirely as its primary motor functions failed. Jake emerged from underneath, covered in hydraulic fluid and electrical burns, just as the massive construct toppled over with a crash that shook the station. The arena fell silent. Then Princess Zara rose from her seat, her voice carrying across the space with regal authority. "The first trial is complete. My chosen has demonstrated the wisdom to defeat strength through intelligence. Let the second trial begin." The crystalline observer seemed momentarily flustered. Ah yes, the trial of poison. A ceremonial chalice was brought forward, filled with the same luminescent liquid Princess Zara had shown him in the lab. Jake approached it with all the enthusiasm of a man walking to his execution, which wasn't far from the truth. Dr. Wong had spent 3 days trying to find a way to neutralize Terraxian neurotoxins with limited success. The antidote I developed should counteract about 60% of the venom's effects, she had told him. The other 40%, well, try to think positive thoughts. Jake lifted the chalice, acutely aware that 1,000 alien witnesses were watching his every move. The liquid glowed with an inner light that was probably beautiful if you weren't about to drink it. To Princess Zarathol, he said, raising the cup in a toast, and to really bad life choices. He drained the chalice in one gulp. The neurotoxin hit his system like liquid fire. His vision blurred, his muscles spasmed, and somewhere in the back of his mind he could feel his nervous system beginning to shut down. But Dr. Wong's antidote held, barely keeping him conscious and breathing. What he hadn't expected was the truth serum effect. "Holy crap," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the arena through the amplification system, "that tastes like someone liquefied a garbage disposal." Nervous laughter rippled through the alien spectators. "And can I just say," Jake continued, unable to stop the words from tumbling out, "that this entire situation is completely insane. I mean, I fix coffee machines for a living. 3 weeks ago. My biggest worry was whether the atmospheric recyclers needed new filters. Now I'm married to alien royalty and fighting robot death machines." Princess Zara's carefully composed expression cracked slightly, revealing what might have been amusement. "No," Jake went on, swaying slightly as the neurotoxin wreaked havoc with his balance, "I have to admit, Princess Zara is probably the most incredible woman I've ever met." Woman? Person? Individual? Whatever. She could literally crush my skull with her bare hands. And somehow that's not even the most intimidating thing about her. The arena had gone completely quiet except for Jake's increasingly rambling confession. "She's brilliant, you know. Scary smart. And she actually listens when people talk, which is more than I can say for most humans. Plus, she brought me severed heads as presents, which is thoughtful in a deeply disturbing way." Princess Zara was now leaning forward in her seat, her expression unreadable. "But the thing is," Jake continued, his voice growing softer as the truth serum reached its peak concentration, "I think I'm actually starting to like her. Which is probably the stupidest thing I've ever thought, because she's royalty and I'm, well, me." The neurotoxin finally released its hold on his nervous system, and Jake collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. But he was alive, conscious, and apparently still capable of embarrassing himself in front of galactic dignitaries. "The second trial is complete," the observer announced unnecessarily. "Prepare for the final challenge." As arena staff began rigging the suspension cables that would hoist him up to the communications array, Jake caught Princess Zara's eye across the distance. For just a moment her royal composure slipped entirely, replaced by an expression of such genuine warmth and affection that it took his breath away. Maybe the truth serum was still affecting his judgment, but Jake found himself thinking that hanging upside down from a space station antenna might not be the worst way to spend an afternoon. He was probably wrong about that. Dangling upside down from Harmony Point's main communications array, with the blood rushing to his head, and the vast star field spinning slowly beneath him, Jake Martinez experienced what could charitably be called an epiphany. The final trial's puzzle box hung in front of him, but suspended on its own cable a complex geometric construction of interlocking rings and crystalline components that was supposed to test his problem-solving abilities under physiological stress. According to Corvan tradition, only a mind worthy of royal partnership could unravel its secrets while inverted and oxygen-deprived. Jake stared at it for approximately 30 seconds, then began to laugh. "What appears to be amusing the challenger?" The crystalline observer inquired through the comm system, his harmonized voice carrying a note of confusion. "It's a puzzle box," Jake said, still chuckling as he reached for the device. "My 8-year-old niece has one just like this. He twisted 2 of the outer rings in opposite directions, causing the entire structure to collapse into a simple geometric shape. There. The silence that followed was profound enough to hear the station's life support systems humming. The final trial is complete, Jake announced to his suspended audience of alien dignitaries. Can someone please get me down from here before I pass out? 20 minutes later, back on solid ground and with his circulation restored, Jake found himself facing the moment he'd been dreading for a week. Princess Zara Thol approached across the arena floor, magnificent in her ceremonial robes, ready to claim her mate according to ancient law. But Jake had spent those 20 minutes thinking, and the blood rushing to his head had apparently knocked something loose in his brain. "Your Highness," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's amplification system, "before we proceed with this bonding ritual, I have a question about Corvan law." Princess Zara paused, her expression curious. "Speak, my chosen." "The ancient law states that I must prove myself worthy of you, correct?" "It does. But where in that law does it say that you've proven yourself worthy of me?" The arena erupted into chaos. Councillor Vexmar's compound eyes nearly burst from his head. Ambassador Flemwick looked like he was about to molt from pure stress. Even War Chief Grok Hal leaned forward in his seat, his scarred features betraying something that might have been surprise. Princess Zara stared at Jake for a long moment, her reptilian features unreadable. "You challenge my worthiness?" "I'm invoking reciprocal standards," Jake said calmly. "If Corvan law requires the male to prove himself through trials, then surely it must require the same of the female. Otherwise, it's not really about worthiness at all, it's just about gender bias." The crystalline observer was frantically consulting legal databases, his harmonic voice pitched higher with confusion. There is no precedent for this interpretation." "Because no one's ever thought to ask," Jake replied. "Princess, you want to marry me? Prove you're worthy of a human husband." Princess Zara's expression shifted through several different emotions: surprise, indignation, consideration, and finally something that looked suspiciously like respect. "What trial would you set for me?" she asked. Jake smiled. "Something from my culture. Make me a proper cup of coffee." The request was so utterly mundane, so completely divorced from the ritual's martial tradition, that it took several seconds for anyone to process what he'd actually said. "Coffee?" Princess Zara repeated. "It's coffee," Jake confirmed. "It's a human bonding ritual. The preparation requires patience, precision, timing, and understanding of complex chemical processes, but in my culture, offering someone coffee is an act of hospitality and care." He gestured toward the maintenance alcove where this entire mess had started. "Coffee machine 7 is still broken. Fix it, and brew me a cup that meets human standards. If you can do that, I'll accept that you're worthy of me." Princess Zara looked at the coffee machine, then back at Jake, then at the 1,000 alien witnesses watching this unprecedented turn of events. "I accept your challenge," she said. What followed was perhaps the most diplomatically significant coffee preparation in galactic history. Princess Zara approached the machine with the same intensity she brought to combat, but mechanical systems operated by entirely different principles than warfare. She tried brute force first, naturally. When the machine's casing proved resistant to her considerable strength, she attempted to disassemble it using her ceremonial war knife. When that failed, she resorted to percussive maintenance, essentially hitting it with progressively larger objects until Jake finally intervened. "Your Highness," he said gently, "maybe I could offer some guidance? You would aid me in your own trial?" "I'd teach you. There's a difference." For the next hour, Jake patiently walked Princess Zara through the basics of coffee machine repair and operation. She proved to be a remarkably quick learner once she stopped trying to solve mechanical problems through violence, and there was something oddly intimate about working together on such a mundane task while 1,000 aliens watched in fascination. Finally, the machine gurgled to life, and Princess Zara prepared her first cup of human coffee with the concentration of a master tactician planning a crucial battle. She presented the cup to Jake with formal ceremony. He took a sip, considered the flavor, and delivered his verdict to the waiting galaxy. "It's terrible," he said honestly. "Weak, bitter, and somehow both under and over-extracted at the same time." Princess Zara's shoulders sagged slightly. "But," Jake continued, "it's definitely coffee, and you made it yourself through patience and learning rather than force. Which means, according to human standards, you've proven yourself worthy." He set the cup aside and stepped closer to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "The thing is, Princess, I don't think either of us needs to prove anything to anyone else. The question is whether we want to prove something to each other." Princess Zara looked down at him, her expression soft and contemplative. "And what would you have us prove?" "That we can be friends. That we can understand each other despite coming from completely different worlds. That maybe sometimes the best relationships start with mutual respect instead of ancient laws and diplomatic obligations." She was quiet for a long moment, then straightened to address the arena. "The trials are complete, but I withdraw my claim of bonding." The arena erupted again, but Princess Zara's voice cut through the chaos with royal authority. "Jake Martinez has proven himself worthy through courage, wisdom, and honor. But he has also shown me that worthiness alone is not sufficient foundation for partnership. By human custom, such bonds should be built on mutual choice and understanding, not obligation." She turned back to Jake, extending one clawed hand. "I would be honored to call you friend, Jake Martinez. And perhaps, in time, we might discover if friendship could grow into something more." Jake shook her hand, marveling at how carefully she controlled her strength to avoid crushing his fingers. "I'd like that, Your Highness." "Zara," she corrected. "My friends call me Zara." "In that case, my friends call me Jake." As diplomatic chaos swirled around them, and Ambassador Flemwick began the complex process of explaining to the Galactic Council why ancient Corvan law had just been rewritten by a maintenance technician, Jake found himself oddly optimistic about the future. He still had a coffee machine to fix, severed heads to dispose of, and what appeared to be a small arsenal of alien weaponry cluttering up his quarters. But he also had a new friend who could bench press a spacecraft and was apparently willing to learn about human culture one terrible cup of coffee at a time. All things considered, it wasn't the worst way this could have ended. 3 months later, Jake's quarters had been expanded to accommodate his impressive collection of friendship gifts from Princess Zara, who had taken to visiting Harmony Point regularly under the pretext of diplomatic relations. Her coffee-making skills had improved dramatically, though she still approached the machine with more intensity than the task strictly required. The standing invitation to visit the Corvan homeworld remained open. Jake's response remained the same polite decline, though Princess Zara had started sweetening the offer with promises of showing him their famous gardens instead of their gladiatorial arenas. He was beginning to think he might take her up on it someday. After all, how dangerous could alien gardening possibly be? Given his recent luck, he probably didn't want to know the answer to that question.